Hello, everyone. This is Parrish, Alford with the Daily Journal. I'm joined by Logan Lowery, our Mississippi State beat writer. This is Double Coverage, a production of the Daily Journal, all things Mississippi State and Ole Miss for the next half hour or so, and no shortage of those topics. Logan, how are you?
I'm doing good, Parrish. It just the last week, basically since we did the podcast last week, it's been pretty much nonstop over here, and some things kind of coming unexpectedly to keep me busier than what I normally would be this time of year. But definitely haven't had any shortage of things to write about or talk about this week.
Well, there is lots to talk about. Some of those things we'll just kind of glaze over the top with. We really could call this the Andy and Andy program because we're going to talk about Andy Cannizzaro and Andy Kennedy. Andy Kennedy, Ole Miss basketball coach, has now resigned twice. We'll hit that a little bit. Andy Cannizzaro, Mississippi State baseball coach, has resigned. That's what's been unexpected. Logan, let's go right into Andy Cannizzaro. We'll come back and talk about Kennedy. That's, the Andy Kennedy news is something that's been taking shape all season long and was kind of expected. And in his first resignation, he talked about the handwriting on the wall. Certainly he could see it, wanted to remove pressure off his team, which, by the way, has since won a game. We'll talk about all that in a little bit, but the unexpected news of the week. Logan, where better to hear news? Number one, djournal.com. Number two, the barbershop. And I admit that I was at the barbershop Tuesday morning when I started to learn about Andy Cannizzaro. Just what happened there?
Well, I was in Hattiesburg over the weekend and covered Mississippi State. They got swept down there by Southern Miss, did not play well in most facets of the game, and that was sort of to be expected. With a young team kind of finding their way. A lot of those guys playing in their first college Division I college baseball game series and stuff like that. So they're kind of getting their feet wet against a very good Southern Miss team. I could go on and on about them, but that lineup is very good, and I was very impressed with Southern Miss. But that had nothing to do with Andy Cannizzaro being let go from his position here at Mississippi State. Got back Monday, was taking care of some things on the basketball side. Actually, had went to Humphrey Coliseum to interview Abdul Adu before they left to go on their road trip, and was walking out of the Hump, and I looked down there towards the baseball office where all the construction's going on Duty Noble Field, and I saw Andy Cannizzaro in his workout gear, which is not surprising to see him in that. And he was walking towards the baseball office, really didn't think too much of it. Went and got in the truck, drove back home. And about the time I got back home, I started getting some text messages and some things. So the rumors were starting to get out that something could be unfolding with Mississippi State's baseball program. And as the night went on, the rumors grew stronger. And, when you see there's smoke, there's fire. And before the night was over, I learned that Andy Cannizzaro was no longer going to be Mississippi State's baseball coach. And he was a guy that I thought was going to be State's baseball coach for decades to come. He was a young guy, 39 years old, very positive, very energetic. They kind of made him the face of the program. You saw him in all these videos that the school was producing, but some off-the-field troubles led to his demise at Mississippi State. There was rumors of infidelity. He talked about in his release Tuesday morning when the school made it official. They sent out a press release about 10 o'clock Tuesday morning, and it basically, he admitted to some, had some personal, he made some poor decisions, is how he put it. So, you can read into that what you can. All you got to do is browse around on the internet, and you can kind of find out what went wrong with that situation. But he's not the first coach that got into that situation. It's probably not going to be the last. But it's a very unfortunate situation to a bright and promising young coach who had the world in front of him. And this is going to take a while if he ever gets back to where he was at this season. But just did so much for Mississippi State in his one season. Had that roster depleted last year of pitchers and guided them all the way to a super regional in year one. Big things were expected of him, and he doesn't even coach a game in that brand new $55 million stadium that they're about to unfold.
Logan, he's not the first coach in Mississippi in the last 6 months to have this kind of problem. And look, we know that infidelity. Folks, we're dancing around this because I'm assuming, Logan, that no one has come to you with hard, fast information on exactly what happened. But like you said, if you just kind of, type in whatever you want to around the internet, you'll find the rumors there. But, that's sex has brought down many men from the beginning of time. That will continue. I hope that Andy Cannizzaro, if in fact that's everything that's gone on is what the rumors would have you believe, that he can get his family back in order and can, reverse those poor decisions he was talking about, can make better decisions moving forward. Logan, in your column the next day, you talked about just 24 hours before Andy Cannizzaro speaking at a women's basketball luncheon and talking about his excitement for the program and all of that.
Yeah, well, it was a week prior to that. Last week at the women's basketball lunch, and he was the guest speaker. And the thing that I took away from that was, he talked about his excitement. Mississippi State's on a road trip right now. They started that last night at Jackson State, and they flew to Texas today. They're going to be it's a 12-day, 9-game road trip that they're on right now. So they actually won't be back in Starkville until early March when they get ready to open that new stadium on March the 6th. But he talked about how his wife had a baby due any day now, and they had scheduled a C-section for a certain day while they were out in Texas, and it was kind of in between games. So he was actually going to fly the university plane back to Starkville for the birth of their third child, and then fly back out to Texas for their next ball game. So he was talking about kind of his plan for that, and that's what I kind of kept thinking about when you hear all this infidelity. I mean, he was a husband. He had 2 small children at home already. Had like I said, a third one on the way. And then you find out the dark and shady things that were going on or alleged to be going on, and it just kind of makes you look at somebody in a different light than. And I thought very highly of Andy Cannizzaro, and we all have our personal demons, and you can't throw stones at people, for things. We each all have our problems, but I actually thought very highly of Andy. I liked him. He was a great coach to work with from a media coach perspective, and I thought highly of him. But now you kind of see people in a different light when their personal problems come to light.
Well, look, Logan, you and I, and this has been kind of my position with Hugh Freeze. We write about athletes and second chances all the time. Some athletes take advantage of those second chances. I think they deserve a second chance to get their life in order. I'm not big on third chances, and things like that, and just continually, as some coaches might try to bring a player around in spite of what's going on in his past. At some point, you do have to take responsibility. Look, as far as we know, this is the first time, at least the first time, that this type of thing has become this public with Andy Cannizzaro, and it has cost him, as you pointed out in your column, a tremendous opportunity, at his age with the baseball program he was leading in the SEC. So lots of things not going right in Andy Cannizzaro's world right now. And, we're thinking especially of his family, and hopefully he can get all those things in order. Let's look on the field, Logan. Not every program has a former successful SEC coach on staff that they can hand the reins to.
Yeah, and Gary Henderson was actually brought on staff by John Cohen after he was let go of his duties up there at Kentucky. John Cohen brought him in to be his pitching coach, and then when John Cohen took the AD job at Mississippi State, Andy Cannizzaro retained Gary Henderson, and I thought that was a smart move because Andy Cannizzaro had 0 head coaching experience prior to last season. So to have a veteran coach, especially a coach that has spent 19, well, I guess at that point, it spent 18 years in the SEC coaching and 28 years overall coaching, to have that a coach of that caliber to kind of bounce things off of. And then now, obviously, Gary Henderson is the interim head coach, and I don't know that he will, have that interim tag taken off at the end of the season. I guess he could coach his way into contention to be that the next head coach. But obviously, he knows John Cohen very well. They coached together, at Kentucky, and he's a name that, he's a former SEC Coach of the Year. He led Kentucky to 2 regionals. He's been a national assistant coach of the year. So a veteran coach, and, the players talk very highly. We actually got to talk to Gary and a couple of the players after the Jackson State game last night. Went down to Jackson to cover that ball game. Hour and 15-minute rain delay, but Mississippi State finally got their very first win of the season. Beat Jackson State 12-1. Hit a couple of home runs in that game and played well. But that's to be expected against a SWAC opponent. But we'll have to see how they do on this long road trek out to Texas. But I think it's good for this team to get that bonding time because they've been through a lot. 4 games into the season, this team's already been through a lot, and so they'll have some time to kind of bond and gel together, and we'll see what type of team comes back here on March the 6th.
What did players have to say? I'm sure that they were politically correct in their comments and pushed all the right buttons there, but I know that there has been a lot that they've had to deal with. I know they've dealt with emotions, with anger, and frustration from the series at Southern. Just a lot they've dealt with the last week and a half. What they have to say after the Jackson State game?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of politically correct stuff. They were coached up, and they said the right things when the questions were asked. But you can't. I mean, that those players have been through a lot, and they've seen some stuff that they may have even saw some of this coming. I mean, it was out of left field. I mean, it's totally unexpected from my point of view. But I'm not around there. I'm not at practice every day. I didn't spend as much time with Andy as they did. So it was just it came out of left field for me, but the players may have seen it coming. But I think a lot of those same players were blindsided as well.
Hey, folks, before we move on and talk about the other Andy, I want to remind you about a couple of things going on at the Daily Journal. Be sure to check out the memo, some changes there. Once a week, every Thursday, with Chris Kiefer and Emma Crawford Kent. Kind of a deeper dive into some of the bigger issues around Northeast Mississippi. Be sure to check that out. Also, look for Prep Rally with Dalton Middleton and Brad Locke for all your high school sports needs. Logan and I are here with you every week with double coverage. Logan, I tell you what, man, I told you when the show started, we're taping a little bit different time now. So I got cheese grits in the oven back here. It's about that time. So I'm going to hand off and let you talk a little bit about Mississippi State women's basketball and, where they are with the goals they have to accomplish right now. And I'm going to get those cheese grits out of the oven. I'll be right back.
I'll let you handle business, Parrish. I'll see if I can, steer the ship while you're gone to do that. But right now, Mississippi State's women's basketball, they play a game tonight. It'll be their final home game of the season. They play against Auburn 7:00 tonight. Many of you probably by the time you're listening to this, that game will already be over. But Mississippi State still has a chance to finish out the regular season undefeated. They clinched their first ever SEC regular season championship outright. It was actually their first ever SEC championship in a women's sport. They finished that out Sunday, 76-55 victory over a ranked Texas A&M team. They play Auburn at home, like I said, tonight, and then they'll finish out the regular season Sunday at 11 o'clock. So Mississippi State still ranked number 2 in the country right now, undefeated, and right now they're pegged to be a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. I think the latest projections have them in the Kansas City bracket of that region, which would be opposite UConn. So that could be a potential national championship rematch, of course, of that Final Four game a year ago. But they're playing really well. They're kind of clicking on all cylinders. The thing to watch in tonight's game, if you're listening to this before tonight's game started, last year, Mississippi State did not play well in their senior day game, and they had a chance to share the SEC a year ago and just kind of lay an egg in that Tennessee game to close out the year. So I'm interested to see how these seniors play tonight. And obviously, a big component of what Mississippi State's success over the past few years, Victoria Vivians, Morgan Williams, Rashonda Johnson, Blair Schaefer, those 4 senior guards have done so much for this team. But switching over to the men's side, Mississippi State is kind of playing their way back into contention to get on that SEC tournament bubble. Their bubble was kind of burst last week with that last-second 3-point shot by Riley LaChance of Vanderbilt to win that game 81-80. But Mississippi State bounced back. They've won consecutive games. They beat Ole Miss this past weekend here in Starkville, and then they went out to Texas A&M, and a team that's most bracketologists have in the NCAA tournament. Mississippi State goes out there and wins and wins handily, wins 93-81. Mississippi State's playing some really good basketball, but those back-to-back losses last week at Missouri, 89-85 and 81-80 at Vanderbilt. Those two losses are really hurting Mississippi State, combined with the fact of their lackluster non-conference schedule. Mississippi State really needed to kind of make some hay in the SEC and really couldn't afford any bad losses. But that loss at Ole Miss earlier in the SEC play and the loss at Vanderbilt are really hurting Mississippi State's chances to get into the NCAA tournament. Right now, they're kind of could still play their way into that bubble, but right now it's kind of looking like Mississippi State may be an NIT team. But I still think that's a step in the right direction. Year 3 of Ben Howland.
That is a step in the right direction. I can't imagine an 11-7 SEC team would make the NCAA field, which what the Bulldogs would be if they went out. Hey, folks, shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about the other Andy Kennedy. I mentioned the 2 resignations. After that LSU game, came back on a Monday and said that was it. He was going to resign at the end of the season. He was going to stay on through, at that time, what would be 6 regular season games and an SEC tournament appearance. And those first 2 games after that Monday resignation, the Rebels just were not – they were not with it. I mean, this team that had not played well over the life of what would become a 7-game winning streak really looked out of sync and lethargic in the first half of both of those games. A home loss to an Arkansas team that tried its best to give the game to Ole Miss with the way it was shooting in the first half. But the Rebels shot just 17% in the first half. They go to Mississippi State, allow the Bulldogs to get off to a hot start and a good rhythm. Defensively, State was knocking down shots. Not every one of those was contested, but that's because the Bulldogs had very crisp passing and the Rebels were not playing at the same pace at the start of that game. Ole Miss goes on and shoots like 29% in the first half against Mississippi State. They're down by 13 or so at halftime. And look, it just, it was just like going through the motions in the second half. I thought, really, the Rebels had a spark for a while, but they really never were able to apply real game pressure to Mississippi State in the second half of that game. So all of a sudden comes the second resignation from Andy Kennedy, that coming on the Sunday after the Mississippi State game. He said that he was going to just step away immediately. So the all-time winningest coach in the history of Ole Miss basketball is done. Excuse me, folks. So Andy Kennedy is no longer the coach. Insert Tony Matlock as interim coach, and the Rebels break the streak. It kind of always works out that way, doesn't it? They get a 90-87 overtime win at Missouri, the same Missouri team that had really had the way with them with Jonte Porter a couple of weeks ago in Oxford. So the Rebels go on the road, play well. 25 points from Breein Tyree. We were able to meet with Breein Tyree, Mark Canvas-Hyman, and Tony Matlock before the team left for Missouri. And what we were hearing there, more from Tyree, who isn't quite as politically correct as many student athletes will be these days. He talked about what he described as a rift between Kennedy and the players. He talked about a lack of trust. And Logan, you just you take these things and you try to piece together what you think really happened. Mark Canvas-Hyman followed Tyree and said he didn't think that there were any trust issues there, but he talked about players he thought who had their own agenda and everybody kind of going different directions. I know how frustrated Andy Kennedy was as that losing streak continued to build. I know that everyone who follows Ole Miss basketball, including these players, knew this was going to be a big year for Andy Kennedy for his tenure as Ole Miss coach. Ross Bjork set all this in motion a year ago when he chose not to extend Kennedy's contract. So we knew this was going to be a big year. Players knew it too. I think once the losses started to mount, and the pivotal week here was several weeks ago when Ole Miss had back-to-back road games against Texas A&M and Arkansas. Very winnable games both places. The Rebels go down to the last shot at Texas A&M. A&M has a 2-point lead. Tyree takes a 3-pointer. It goes down the cylinder, circles around, comes back out. another loss. They go to Arkansas. They're in it all the way to the end. They end up losing by 4. That kind of turned it for Ole Miss, I thought, because we had at that point really talked about their struggles on the road. We could see this team playing better at home, winning at home, won its first 4 SEC games at home with wins against Florida, Mississippi State, South Carolina, and I'm leaving somebody out there, Logan, but Alabama. So 4 SEC home wins. Then they go on that road trip. Things don't turn their way. Still a struggle to win on the road. They come back and they play Auburn, which really, was completely healthy and has been the class of the SEC this season. That's not a good matchup for Ole Miss no matter where they play. So they're competitive for a while with Auburn, even in the second half. But eventually the Tigers pull away, and all of a sudden the losses were just mounting. Kennedy was getting frustrated. We could see that in his press conferences. And I think the players picked up on that. And I'll tell you, Logan, one thing Andy Kennedy has done better than any coach I have ever covered, and that is share responsibility with the players. He will say when players aren't playing well and that players need to play better. And he does that more tactfully than any coach I've ever covered. And I think, fans would sometimes hear that and think, well, he's throwing these guys under the bus. Well, if you listen to his complete comments, he was going to take responsibility as well. Everybody knows the buck stops with the head coach, and he would ultimately take that responsibility. But I think players were hearing these comments. I think that, added to the frustration on their part. If in fact what Mark Canvas Hyman said was true with different agendas and players going different ways, it's easy to envision a real lack of chemistry with that group. Andy Kennedy's first resignation did not remove the pressure, so to speak, as he had hoped that it would. But his second one, I don't know what Tony Madlock said to those guys, probably nothing much different. But they went out there, they played hard at Missouri. Some shots that hadn't been falling for Tyree started to find the bottom of the net. They get a big win to just relieve some pressure. Not that it's a win that's going to get them to the NCAAs or the NIT, but nobody wants to end the season with what would have been a 12 or 13 game losing streak. So it was a 7-game losing streak at the time. They go on the road and win at Missouri, and you just get that, as players, you can finally have that good feeling again. You could see the video from the locker room celebration, and hopefully they can turn this thing around, win some games at the end of the year, and just leave with a good feeling, and then let the school focus on the coaching search. Now, I don't know what the future is for Andy Kennedy, Logan. Early on, I asked him if he thought he would be interested in television. Obviously we see the personality, but one thing about Kennedy, he is a college basketball junkie on television. He watches college basketball all the time. He's very informed on what is going on in the sport, not only in Mississippi and the SEC, but around the country. So when you add that to the personality, I think that he would be very good with television. But, that's not what all coaches want to do. So I think Andy Kennedy will be employed again. I think he'll be employed again soon, whether that's TV, whether that's another coaching job, remains to be seen. I hope he can coach as long as he wants to coach. But, Logan, at this stage now, for a coach to continue to coach, he has to be ready to accept a smaller job or an assistant's position, because Andy Kennedy was let go because he did not make the NCAA tournament frequently enough at Ole Miss. In 12 years, made it 2 times. Wasn't going to make it this year. Hasn't made it since 2015. So that's why he was let go. Teams looking to hire head coaches at the Power 5 conference level are looking to see that NCAA tournament resume. How many times have you been? How quickly can you get us there? And that just was not Kennedy's strength while at Ole Miss.
Yeah, and that's actually the similar trip to what Ben Howland did. He at UCLA, he was let go there, and then spent a couple of years in television before he got the itch or urge to return to coaching, and that's kind of the reason that Mississippi State made the decision that they did to get rid of Rick Ray and bring in a Ben Howland, obviously a much bigger name in the coaching ranks. And, right now he's got Mississippi State in contention kind of for the first time to make a postseason run. Obviously they could use some big wins coming out to finish out the regular season. They still have South Carolina left here at home. Mississippi State, that was actually their first road win of the season. They went out and beat South Carolina, so they get the return game here at home in Starkville on Saturday. Then they go to Tennessee next week, and then they close out the regular season at LSU. So I'm sorry, they actually play Tennessee at home. So two of their final 3 games are going to be in the hump, and they've played awfully well in the hump this season. So Mississippi State, if they can make some noise here at the end of the regular season, make some noise at the SEC tournament in St. Louis, Mississippi State may play their way into the big dance. But like I said, I think that they're on the verge of making a postseason, and any type of postseason at this point. They haven't made a postseason since 2012, haven't made the NCAA tournament since 2009. So any type of postseason at this point is going to be huge for this team. They didn't make it at all under Rick Ray. Last time they made it was Stansbury's final year in 2012.
All right, Logan, real quick, we're about out of time. Where is Mississippi State baseball this weekend?
They're in Corpus Christi. They're playing in a tournament out there. They actually play UC Santa Barbara Friday, Nicholls State Saturday, Texas A&M Corpus Christi Sunday, and get this, Mississippi State is traveling to Texas Rio Grande Valley on Monday. So 4 games in 4 days, and I'm pretty sure that's probably going to be the first time an SEC team has ever visited Texas Rio Grande Valley.
A historic, another historic moment for Mississippi State baseball. Hey, folks, a couple of items real quick. Ole Miss could also be looking for a women's basketball coach. There's nothing that I've heard on that, but as you can see the record, you know that the ladies are struggling. That's not a decision that has been made or announced, but it is something to keep an eye on. The Rebels could actually be having 2 coaching searches in basketball at the end of the season. We'll see about the women. No official word on that. Baseball, Ole Miss off to a solid start at the plate. This team that hit 253 last year, the lowest team batting average in the SEC, is right now hitting 326. So a fast start at the beginning. We saw some of this last year. We'll see if this hitting can continue to improve for Ole Miss. The Rebels are at home this weekend against Tulane. The last time Tulane was at Swayze Field, they got a 2-run home run in the 9th inning and eliminated Ole Miss from the Oxford Regional. The Rebels went 0-2 in that 2016 home regional. Folks, remember to check out the Memo with Chris Kiefer and Emma Crawford Kent every Thursday, diving deep into Northeast Mississippi. Be sure to look for Prep Rally with Dalton Middleton and Brad Locke. And Logan and I will be back with you next week for another round of double coverage.